Joining us is Congresswoman Nikema Williams from the Fighting Fifth District here in Atlanta on the Capitol steps in D.C. ahead of President Trump's State of the Union address. Congresswoman Williams, I want to ask you this because we are seeing this State of the Union happen after quite a bit has happened over the week. And on Friday, the Supreme Court ruled that the president lacked legal authority to impose some tariffs under a 1977 law, a national emergency law. And then the president has already signed an executive order enabling him to bypass Congress, imposing a 15% tax on imports from around the world using another law for 150 days. What is your reaction to this tariff talk and what's coming out of the White House?
Well, first, we tried to tell him in the first place that he did not have the authority to do this without powers of Congress. And Congress actually voted in a bipartisan fashion to stop this, to make him have to come back to Congress, holding on to our powers that are given to us in Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. But this all comes back to Trump is putting more taxes on the American people. You can call it a tariff, you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, what it does is raises costs for everyday Americans who are going out to buy goods. It raises costs for our small businesses who are just trying to make ends meet to keep our economy going. And so I know that this extra 15% that he is already could not just sit back and let the Supreme Court ruling stand. This 15% tariff is a tax on the American people at a time when affordability is at an all-time high. That is what I hear across the board, Faith. I hear about rising cost in housing, rising cost in clothing. And if you have a young child like me, you know that when you are trying to keep them from growing out of their clothes, these cost increase, they make an impact. And I am hearing from people all across the state of Georgia and across the country, for that matter, that right now they are seeing more month than money in their budgets. And we must do something about that. But our president is too busy terrorizing communities, lying to the American people, and trying to make them see something or pretend that what they're seeing and what is happening doesn't really exist. So tonight, he's going to show up to a joint address to Congress in the State of the Union, and he's going to continue to spread and tell these lies. But Faith, what I know is that the people that I represent, they deserve the truth. So we're doing a live town hall from my office with constituents tuned in, constituents telling their story on how the Trump administration has impacted them and where we are going from here, because we should not sit back and pretend that any of this is normal, because it is absolutely not normal.
Can I ask you this, Congresswoman? We're hearing since the Supreme Court overturned this, refunds could potentially amount to over $130 billion. Do you support congressional mandates for refunds to both companies and consumers?
So the companies passed on these tariff increases to consumers. Consumers have bared the brunt of this. So if there are going to be rebates, it absolutely needs to go back to the American people who have paid for this out of their hard-earned wages, just trying to make ends meet, buying their everyday goods. So this should not be something that is pocketed by the government. We're seeing the government at every turn try to make money off the American people, whether it is the increase in what we're seeing on student loan fees, or whether it is $45 if you don't have a real ID at TSA checkpoints, or these tariffs. And so the American people have paid enough into this administration where he is off building new ballrooms and golding out the White House and frolicking all over the world. We need to make sure that we're taking care of the American people. And I will always stand on the side of the people, Faith.
I want to ask you about the partial government shutdown that we're in right now. How should Democrats and Republicans break this logjam? We know that a lot of this has to deal with funding for the Department of Homeland Security. What do you see as key sticking points holding up to reach a deal here?
I mean, the key sticking point is the Trump administration and his Republican allies. They're determined to continue terrorizing our communities. They don't want to hold ICE accountable. They don't want to hold federal law enforcement accountable. And what we have seen with our own eyes is that communities have been terrorized. We saw American children being taken from their beds in the middle of the night in Chicago. We saw American citizens gunned down in the streets of Minnesota. We saw this with our own eyes. So to say that nothing needs to change is asinine. We need to do something about this. And this is where the American people have spoke loud and clear. They want us to hold the government accountable. And I am here to be the voice of the people, Faith. So right now, this shutdown that is going through can absolutely be avoided. And also the Department of Homeland Security has billions of dollars that were appropriated in the spring that they could use to keep things funded until this is figured out. But they're choosing not to do so. They choose to fund the parts of the government that they want to fund. So this is squarely at the feet of the Republicans who control the House, the Senate, and the White House.
In terms of DHS's budget, we know that they just purchased a large facility in Social Circle, Georgia. We're hearing that that could open as a detention facility as early as May or April. I want to just kind of press again, Congresswoman Williams. Do you see any consensus between Democrats and Republicans? What do you see? What do you want to see from Republicans in order to push this deal through so that we can end this partial government shutdown so that TSA workers can get paid?
So the consensus between Democrats and Republicans that I'm hearing is of everyday citizens, Republicans, Democrats, independents alike across the board who are living in our communities. They want us to do something. However, Republicans here in Washington, D.C. are only going to do what Donald Trump allows them to do. That is the holdup. Republicans in Washington, D.C. unwilling to be at the holding of the American people, but they are sitting here doing everything that Donald Trump told them to do. That is where this lies, and that's the pressure put on them to be responsive to the American people who voted them into office, not Donald Trump.
Last question for you. What immediate steps can you as a lawmaker take today to protect those essential services and those workers while these negotiations continue? A lot of these TSA workers are just getting back on their feet, if that, from the last government shutdown.
So the steps that I'm taking is continue to ensure that we know who to hold accountable, Faith, because in just a few hours, we're going to have the President of the United States walk into the chamber, and he's going to tell you that the state of our union is strong. He's going to tell you this when part of our government is the shutdown. Imagine that, the president saying that the state of our union is strong when he is not willing to negotiate to keep part of our government open. So we need to make sure that we're raising our voices and raising these concerns to the people that are making this decision right now. Democrats have long stood here ready and willing to negotiate to reopen the government because we understand that lives and livelihoods depend on this. Republicans refuse to even have the conversation.
Anything I didn't ask you that you would like the people of Georgia to know about tonight?
Tonight, the Fighting Fifth will have an opportunity to raise their voices and their concerns and to listen along with me in a live stream that I will be hosting constituents with elected leaders from across the district, writing to my office here on Capitol Hill. Standing there, lying to the American people, and I will always stand on the side of the American people about to bring you the truth. We're going to tell it like it is. We're going to bring it to you straight. And as T.I. says, we got to let them know.
And just to clarify, so you will not be in the chambers, you will be in your office during the State of the Union.
I absolutely not will sit in the chamber and pretend it's this business as usual, Faith, because it is not.